The South African Human Rights Commission's 5-day inquiry into allegations of racism and discrimination in the advertising industry is currently underway. The inquiry was sparked by the controversial Clicks advert in 2020, which labeled black hair as dry and damaged. For more on this, we're joined by race and gender justice scholar Asanda Ngoasheng. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Your assessment of the advertising industry in South Africa in relation to black people.
Thank you for having me. I think that the advertising industry, much like South African society, still has elements of racism and has a lot of microaggressions wherein they use stereotypes of who black people are or who they think black people are and portray us in very specific ways that are not always in congruence with who black people are in 2022. And so we have a lot of ads still that have black people in servitude in terms of jobs. So black people as cleaners, black people as, as taxi drivers, as mechanics, etc., but not enough adverts of black people as scientists, as people who are holding important positions in society and are making, big contributions to society. And the reason for this is because while there has been a proliferation of many black creatives within the advertising industry, the industry on its own is still mostly owned by white people and is still mostly run by white males in particular. And so the people who are making the final decision-making in advertising as an industry is still overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male. And this shows itself up in the adverts because the adverts require somebody who has a bit of cultural competence and a bit of nuance and understanding of not just race but gender as well, by the way.
Now, with that understanding, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around how then things can be turned around. You speak of a proliferation of black creatives in this space, knowing a few very conscious about the kind of work that they put out.
Yeah, I think the industry needs to hire more black people than it currently has. Because remember, we are a country that is almost 90% black. And so advertising industry does not reflect this at the moment and needs to move towards that reflection. And we also need particularly the ownership and the management to be more reflective of a country that is almost 90% black. And at the moment, you're not seeing that. And because you're not seeing that, the kind of ideas that make it to the final stage, the kind of ideas that are valued and that are given money are usually not ideas that are reflective of South Africa and South African society. So for an example, there's a tendency when you talk about stereotypes to showcase black people as township people. Not all black people grew up in the township. There are many black people who have never been in a township because they grew up in a village or they grew up in a suburb. And so we need to start exploring and expanding our ideas of the kinds of characters that black people are and the kind of lives that they have. And also we need to stop with, these stereotypes of showcasing black people when it with luxury as people who are just wanting to show off and have a lot of money and don't really know what to do with it. Whereas when you're showcasing white people using the same things and you're emphasizing this, the safety of the product, you advertising, the other elements that appeal to somebody who has logic and uses logic to make decisions. While when it's black people, you're showcasing them wanting to show off at the Chisanyama in their latest high-end brand car. And so those are the kind of things I mean when I say we need to move away from stereotypes and more, for showcasing of the different versions and types of black people, because we are not homogenous and we don't all think the same or dress the same or even have the same kind of direct experiences because we didn't even grow up in the same area.
You suggest as, a corrective measure, maybe the hiring of more black people. There are a number of creatives who have since opened up their own agencies. I can tell you some for years have not been commissioned because of the way the space is set up, right? So you find people that are closed out and on purpose sometimes. So in terms of, maybe looking at this in the long term, because this is not the first time we're having conversations like these, how then to really move the needle and have some tangible change?
I think that the problem in part is government, because government sets up legislation and regulations and then doesn't monitor it. So there is an advertising charter that nobody's really following. So they need to go back to the drawing board and look at that charter and say, what were the targets and have they been met? And what do we need to do to make sure that those targets get met? We need more black ownership. We need not just black ownership like I'm running away from the racism in an advertising company and I go and start my own, but also black ownership in established, formerly white-owned advertising companies, because, you know, to get the big deals, you need to be an established company. You need to have a track record. And often when you're a young black creative, you don't have that experience and you constantly get overlooked for work because of that experience. So it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that you overlook because you don't have the experience. You don't get the opportunity to have the experience and you continue to be overlooked. So there needs to be, you know, a strict adherence to BEE in terms of advertising company ownership, because narratives are very important, right? And when you don't have people who look like you and a representation of people who look like you, sound like you, and who understand your experiences, what then happens is that you get kind of represented in a very specific way that is not aligned with who you are as a person. And so we need more ownership of you know, more changes, I suppose, in ownership. And I think also there's a lot that black people themselves can also do on the client side, because if you look at the most admired clients right now, it's black people in the main. But those black people are still the same ones going to these mainly white-run advertising agencies to get work done. Why are we still doing that? Why are we not looking as black people for more diversity when we hire people? And why are we as black people who are in marketing accepting briefs that are showcasing black people in ways that you know are not, you know, close to the reality? The reason why clicks happened is because there wasn't enough oversight by enough people who actually have black hair and would be able to say that black hair is not dry and brittle and it is not the things that it's being described as. And even in cases where there are black people, because black people are not in positions of power, they're in lower positions, when they do raise these things, they're not taken seriously. And there isn't a serious kind of rechecking of, oh, actually, maybe this person has a point, let's not do this. And it's only because Clicks was such a big deal and Clicks even had to shut down stores that now suddenly people in advertising were even hiring diversity trainers to try and get them to kind of sort this out, whereas before nobody really seemed to care. And so if government starts regulating, if government starts monitoring and evaluating the implementation of the charter, we're going to see a lot more action, because if you are not adhering to, if you are not meeting some of those targets, you shouldn't be able to get business, particularly government business. And I think the private sector also needs to check itself and look at itself and says, who are the people that we are giving money to create the kind of work that we want to be seen by all kinds of South Africans? And I think it also speaks to the way that even things like the categorization of customers
Asanda Ngoasheng, unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but thank you very much. Points well made. Race and gender justice scholar. Representation matters in a nutshell. Thank you very much for your time.